That picture was taken when me and my friend Bilal and his younger brothers were on our way to secret cinema to watch Empire Strikes Back. And they give you roles, they give you pre-assigned roles before you get there, and our roles were rebel, so... Nailed it, I think. 72% of respondents to a Comres survey in 2016 agreed that most people in Britain have a negative view of Islam. 72%. I've been forced to think about my identity a lot over the last few years. In March 2015, in a documentary for Channel 4, Trevor Phillips, the former head of the Equality Commission, and all-round not a legend, he concluded that Muslims, we're not like the rest of the population, we have a problem integrating. He genuinely said that. In December 2016, Dame Louise Casey published a review for the government in which he was also damning on Muslims integrating in Britain. And just last month, January 2018, BBC's Panorama returned to my hometown of Blackburn to let us know that segregation between the Asians, mostly Muslim, and whites had worsened. Now, my initial instinct with people like Trevor Phillips is to get defensive and angry and to issue a fatwa against him. But then I think, no, that's what he wants. He wants that. Because here's the thing, I am British, I was made in Britain, but one looks in the mirror and sees a face that isn't typically mainstream. And this face has to flick through two concurrently running right-wing narratives. On the one hand, when we create our own spaces, places of worship, shops, places like that, neighborhoods, we get accused of not integrating. Conversely, when more than a single-digit amount of us congregate in mainstream spaces, shopping centers, football matches, service station, McDonald's on the M6, we have to hear whispers like, oh, they're bloody everywhere. Oh, they're taking over. We can't be doing both. We can't be simultaneously not integrating and be bloody everywhere. We're not Schrodinger's Muslim. In an Ipsos Mori poll, also in 2016, British respondents said that they thought the Muslim population in Britain was 15%. It's 5%. Furthermore, they thought the Muslim population in Britain in 2020 would be 22%, when actually it's going to be more like approximately 6%. Why the fear? I have this joke in my stand-up routine. It goes, I'm Muslim, so I've got all of that going on. If you don't know that much about us Muslims, you'll recognize us from that hit TV show, The News. Because we've been on that show a lot this series, haven't we? It is a joke, but the reason why it works so well is because audiences can recognize the truth in it. Unfortunately, most people in this country, and in wider Europe, and in the US, only know Muslims from the media. And the vast majority of that is when a Muslim person has committed a crime and is on the news. And of course, breaking the law is awful. Of course it is. And sometimes people who are Muslim commit horrific crimes, and that is bad. But you know what is also really harmful? Blaming and stigmatizing an entire community because of the actions of some criminals. And I do blame the media for this. It's like they've groomed the most susceptible in society to trust its own worst fears and bigotry. And look, maybe there's no actual evidence of what I'm saying, but I just feel like a harmful narrative is being created by the media, whereby minority groups are collectively judged by the very worst representatives. But as I said, maybe there's no actual evidence. As I said, maybe there's no actual evidence for what I'm saying, but it's just a feeling I have. I do believe that integration is a two-way street, and if it's true that most people in Britain don't know any Muslims personally, then allow me to take 2 minutes to tell you a bit about me. Blackburn is where I was born and raised. In a working-class Asian community is where I spend most of my days, chilling out. No, but it was the sort of community that was ripe for a documentary about integration. or 2 documentaries, or 3. But the thing is, growing up in an insular, working-class Asian, Muslim, Northwest-based English community, it comes with its own fascinating subculture. It means school had a GCSE pass rate of 30%, which is half of the 60% national average. It didn't help that we speak like this, innit, like proper rubber dinghy rappers, bro. There were actually more race riots in my school than music teachers, believe it or not. In primary school, Chris Wade really fancied Halima, so I taught him to impress her some random Punjabi. Teri maa M6 pe nange nachi. She then slapped him, because that actually means your mum dances naked on the M6. Poor Chris. Every evening after school, I went to mosque to sit on the floor, reading the Quran in a language I didn't understand, trading pogs with my friends, and dodging the imam's punches. And I mean that literally, not figuratively. All our names mean something cool. Like my cousin Shabazz, his name means eagle. Whereas my cousin Malaika, her name means angel. How sweet is that? I actually Googled my name to find out what that means, my full name. It's that, Tehzeeb, Tehzeeb. It's not a name, that, is it? If anything, that's a tricky hand at Scrabble, that. I hated it. Hated it growing up. Thing is though, I did Google it to find out what it means, and it turns out genuinely there's a Bollywood film out there called Tehzeeb, and I thought that this information was outstanding until I read the plot of the film, and then I wasn't so impressed. So this is a genuine plot of the genuine Bollywood film Tehzeeb, which also happens to be my name. Story time. Anwar and Rukhsana had been married for years. It's quite sweet so far. However, Anwar commits suicide, plot twist, after falling into a deep depression following the birth of his daughter, Tehzeeb. I went to university only weeks after 9/11 and thought, man, if I ace this biochemistry degree, they're going to put me on a bloody watch list. So I just learned to dance instead. We don't drink, but we abuse our lungs with shisha, our arteries with halal meat, and with the face of diabetes because, well, we basically treat desserts like my friend Chris treats a bottle of whiskey, there to be destroyed. I don't drink, which makes going out with certain friends a bit tricky. I did actually go on Chris's stag do, which he had in Benidorm. Have any of you guys ever been to Benidorm? O-M-A. Benidorm is like Narnia, if Narnia was also a retirement home for British nationalists, all right? Genuinely, because I don't drink, the whole time I was in Benidorm, I was a bit like, you know that guy who goes to Alton Towers theme park, but just holds the bags and the coats when everyone else goes on the rides? That was what it was like for this guy. I watched a lot of my friends and cousins and family flourish in Blackburn, making big success for themselves. But I still know more people from Blackburn who've been to prison than who work in the arts. I don't want my niece and nephew growing up in a Britain where they get into trouble at school because they tell the teacher they live in a terraced house, but she hears terrorist house and calls the damn police. That's actually happened to someone. Over the last 15 years, I've seen the changing attitudes of people in institutions towards people who look like me, meaning I'm asked to be a spokesperson when someone from a similar background to me does something evil. And it's all very well being a stand-up comedian, but I must qualify to comment on terrorism as Manchester United fans are to comment on life in Manchester. Now, a lot of people in here, and watching this maybe somewhere else, they won't recognize a lot of those life experiences. Maybe it's quite a unique perspective to them. But all of those things have happened to me living in this country. There is not one homogeneous British identity. British culture and identity is always changing. 65 years ago, this country killed thousands of Mau Mau in Kenya in gulags. We only abolished Section 28, the archaic law that prohibited the promotion of homosexuality in 2003. 2003. And just a short 30 years ago, men in this country thought it was acceptable to have a mullet. This country is ever changing. Philosophical, moral, cultural evolution and revolution is at the very core of this country's DNA, as well as physiological. So yes, the lives that some Muslims lead in Britain might not be typically British, but that does not make us any less British. The fact that my life experiences are happening in Britain today means they are by default British experiences. And boy, those experiences are not easy sometimes. There are genuine groups of people out there who hate Muslims and Islam. BNP, British National Party, EDL, English Defence League, Britain First, they hate us. And one of the reasons they give, because apparently we don't integrate. They've got this conspiracy that we're trying to take over with our halal meat and Sharia law and Muslimic Reagans. It's a genuine quote. And because they think we don't integrate, they wish we'd left and went back to Muslamistan. Again, a genuine quote. Ignoring the fact that most of us were born here, so where are we meant to go? And I don't even know what to label this bigotry as, because when I challenge it, they tell me that Islamophobia doesn't exist. And it can't be racism, because Islam is not a race. I guess it is just a convenient coincidence then, that 90% of Muslims in this country happen to be brown and black. What the biggest don't realize is the ill effects that this avalanche of negativity has had on the Muslim psyche. I shouldn't have to work so little to come across so much Muslim bashing every single day, but I do. This sort of thing makes people retreat and become more insular. You know what hearing and seeing this sort of thing day in, day out makes you not want to do? Integrate. Thing is, this bigotry manifests itself in really weird ways. I was doing a stand-up gig a couple of years ago, and completely unrelated to anything that I was saying on stage, a woman from the back of the room heckled me, and she shouted out at the top of her voice, "Bacon!" I don't know what she thought was gonna happen. Like, bacon is many things, but what it isn't is Muslim kryptonite. I don't know what she thought was happening. Did she think I was the Wicked Witch of the West? She was Dorothy in this story. The bacon was a metaphorical pail of water. And I'm like, oh, I'm melting. Attack flying monkey Taliban creatures, attack. No. It's not like she's going to Muslim majority countries and they're shouting things at her that are not relevant to her, like, oi, dignity. If I had £1 for every single time my match on Tinder blocked me when they found out I was Muslim, I'd have £13. I mean, you have to laugh, but I'm tired, man. It makes me weary. I feel like other. Like, here's me. Top 10 university graduate, master's educated, lived for 10 years in gentrified South London, takes his own show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, star of a BBC sitcom, pretty well-adjusted British Muslim bowel accounts, and I feel like other. If that's me, then how is a young kid growing up today in an insular community in Bradford or East London feeling? But then I think about other things. And I remember that a couple of years ago, the end of Ramadan coincided with the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So I was celebrating Eid away from my family for the very first time in my life. And I felt quite lonely. But then, my fellow comics, my friends, they took me out for an Eid meal. And they bought me an Eid cake. And they sang Happy Eid to you. And that is not a thing. That is not a thing. But it's one of the sweetest memories of my entire life. And I think about my granddad, who fought for this country in the Second World War. And after the war, along with thousands of other expats, he came here and helped rebuild it. So how can I not belong? And I think about my mum, my dear mum, who came to this country as a teenager with no formal education, but she made damn sure that I could read and write well, make something of myself. And I was fortunate enough to take on pilgrimage a couple of years ago, the Hajj. And when I was there, I just thought about all the sacrifices and hard work that she'd done and she'd made to make sure that I could fit in the country of my birth. So to hell with the bigots, if they're going to make me feel like I don't belong. And you know what, though? Maybe Trevor Phillips is right. Maybe we are different. You know, maybe we haven't integrated. You know, apart from wearing the clothes and speaking the language and paying bucket loads of tax and looking after people when they leave pubs and clubs by feeding them in restaurants and takeaways and taking them home in cabs and making up a disproportionate percentage of the frontline services of the NHS. Apart from those very minor things, apart from that, we've made no effort at all. And I always find it very, very interesting, because I've studied British history. And actually, going to another country, not speaking the language, forcing your customs on others, sticking to your own religion, and making no effort to integrate, is actually the most British thing you can do. So if the bigots are right, and we are trying to take over the country, then actually it doesn't get any more British than that, does it? And I always find it really ironic that the people who say, well, if you don't like it here, why don't you go somewhere else? They're the people who complain about this country the most. So I say to you, Mr. BNP, Miss Britain First, Mr. EDL, if you don't like it here, why don't you go somewhere where you belong? Benidorm. Because we ain't going nowhere. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I'm Tez Ilyas. Good night and Allah bless.